Good morning, everyone. So today you and I are going to define some things. We're going to talk about DevOps and operations. So let's get into it. Now, I have to clarify some things on this topic, I think, because I had a subscriber the other day who basically flattered me enormously by asking for a little bit of guidance in his future career, basically. And he walked me kind of through his prior knowledge and a little bit about himself, and I read everything as carefully as I could. And by the end of his description of himself, he mentioned that he had prior knowledge of operations type of work, things such as Amazon Web Services and so forth. And he touched on something that I have said in a previous video. It is a video where I review a DevOps roadmap. And he mentioned that in order to, that I had said, and this is absolutely true, I stated that in order for you to be an effective type of person who works with DevOps, you kind of have to have, it's very beneficial for you to have prior programming knowledge. And this is absolutely true. However, the sensation that I got is that maybe there's a little bit of confusion here about operations and DevOps. That's why I wanted to make this video, because we need to define this for you guys. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, and it's something that I felt was very confusing when I started out as well. There are a lot of technical terms in the IT world that are thrown around. Some of them are used correctly, some of them are not used correctly. A few favorites of mine are URI and URL, and maybe API. Like everybody's, well, what do you mean by API? Do you mean a programming interface? Do you mean a REST API? What do you mean? There's a lot of ambiguity in the IT world, and DevOps and operations is one of those things that may be very, very confusing for a lot of people. So let me define these things for you first and foremost. And of course, this is my definition. And just as with microservices, it is the sort of thing where the popularized meaning is what I'm going to go with here, but that doesn't mean that it's definitive. There are certainly more semantically correct ways of defining this, but I'm still going to give it a go, because as you may have noticed on this channel, I try to give you clarity as opposed to giving you every single option out there. Honestly, I would rather have you correct me and ask me, Frederick, why are you saying this thing when I know that there's all these other things, and explain that to you, as opposed to trying to, because at least that's how I feel about it. If you have literally a million options, I honestly believe that it's more beneficial for you, especially when you don't really know any better, to have clarity and get something that is, in the opinion of somebody with a little bit more experience, the way to go, or the definition, or something like that. Something that gives you something solid to hold on to, because too much too early gives you just a sense of insecurity. And I'm not on this channel, I'm not going for that. I'm going for making you feel as if you understand. That's what this is all about, and this is why I'm going to define DevOps in the way that I see DevOps versus operations. Now, let's talk about operations first and foremost. Infrastructure, all that sort of thing. Let's define that. First and foremost, operations is the sort of field you work in when you manage the infrastructure of a company, basically, or an application. Usually it's a large application. Operations is very rarely something you do full time at a small company, and the reason for that is that these days things are moving over to DevOps. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, it used to be the case that because the tools that we were using in order to scale up really large applications, or back in the day, it was actually just a mid-sized application, depending on your definition of size, basically. And that meant that in those days you needed people who actually had the sort of knowledge that an operations person needs to have, which is things such as networking, setting up virtual machines or running actual hardware, these sort of things. Using, well, for the beginners out there, using things such as SSH, for example, and password management or secret management. Setting up environments is a big part of it. There was a lot of overhead work in order to maintain a large-scale system. And I can tell you that that sort of work is still around. It's moving more towards cloud, which is Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, so forth and so forth. But where's this DevOps thing coming into play? Well, the DevOps part of it is the trend that is moving right now. It was, the word really came around just like not that long ago. And that's where people get confused, because people confuse DevOps with operations. Now, and that's what I think happened to happen when I was explaining this DevOps thing to you. Because the fact of the matter is that if you want to be a purebred operations person, you may find that it might be a little bit trickier to find that sort of work depending on where you're looking, but it's not impossible by any means. There are tons of companies who need operations people, and those people do not need programming skills as a hard requirement. It's probably very beneficial. I imagine, because unfortunately you and I, we live in the sort of world where the diversity of the work we do gets bigger and bigger, and that's why an old colleague of mine probably said it better than anybody else. He said that a programmer is the perfect unit of workforce, because you can throw a programmer at every single problem. You can use a programmer to do operations, you can use a programmer to do QA work, and so forth and so forth. It's the perfect unit, because with the programmer, you can morph them into basically anything you want. That is not true for somebody who is just a QA, or, well, I don't like to use the term just, but who only works in QA or who only works in operations. But that doesn't mean that you can't get by without these programming skills for this type of work. Now, as I said, I'm stating right now that programming skills to do just operations is not a hard requirement. However, DevOps is actually the exact same thing as operations, with one major difference. And this is where people get confused. DevOps is a popularized term that kind of became this umbrella thing, or this umbrella term for moving the responsibility of running and maintaining a system to the development team. Because think about it this way, it used to be the case that the programmer built all the software and shipped the code as a zip file or a tarball or something like that to the operations people, who then were responsible for making sure that there were health checks, making sure that it got out to production, and made sure that they were on call, and made sure they had full responsibility. And DevOps is actually not a field of study. It has nothing to do with like a technical education or something like that. It's something that indicates a shift in responsibility in the business world. It is something that is very much more a office culture type of thing than anything technical. In order for you to be a DevOps person, all you actually have to be is a programmer who is responsible for writing the code that the application is using, and at the same time be the person who runs the system. In other words, you build the thing and you maintain it. That's DevOps. That's all it is. There's nothing else going on there. And that's, as I said, it's just a shift in responsibility from one type of person, an operations person who only maintain the project, over to a programmer who builds the project and now maintains it. That's DevOps. That's what it is, per my definition, and I'm pretty sure that is the general definition. So, what are the downsides and what are the benefits? Well, the downsides with having this sort of structure is that you get less development time. That is something a lot of people don't understand. This is very beneficial for small companies, but large companies who have a lot of money, they tend to invest in people who full-time manage operations, because the larger the system gets, the more time you need to invest in order to maintain the system. And if you don't want to lose development speed, hey, your programmers actually have to have time to build the thing. And DevOps, as I said, it's very beneficial to smaller companies, because it kind of cultivates this culture where you take ownership. And from the business perspective, the best thing in the world, I mean, for a boss, there's nothing greater than having highly productive, skilled programmers who feel that they own the project. Because if they feel that they own the project, they will go the extra mile for the project, and the health of the product will increase. And this has been proven many, many times over. If you can give a sense of ownership to your developers, that is the best thing you can possibly do. And it's very tricky to do that. But DevOps has been proven to be one of those things. There are, of course, a lot of downsides with this thing as well. But I'm not going to go into all of it, because there's so many aspects to it. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that when you think about DevOps, don't think about it as a field of study or something that you go into. There's no one out there who are looking for a DevOps person. Maybe they will say that on some job application somewhere, or like some ad somewhere. But what I want you to take away from this is that DevOps is simply a job working in an environment where you don't only write the code, you also maintain the product itself. That's all it is. And an operations person is someone who exclusively focuses on the operations part of things. And when it comes to employment, my guess, which I think it should be fairly accurate, is that an operations person needs to look at usually larger companies, very, very large companies, because those are the sort of companies that have the need to have people who are specialized in one thing. But when you go further down the ladder and you get to smaller to mid-sized companies, they are much more interested in general, like broad people, because they don't have the money to get specialists in every field. They want people to be able to do as much as possible. That's the trend that I see anyway. So hopefully this clears some stuff up. And once again, what I want you to remember is there is absolutely nothing that forces you to be a programmer in order to be an operations person. It's a good thing, but it's not a hard requirement. Have a great day.